few other spots there if you want to get to that. But Kim and I decided when we moved up here over 3 years ago now that we were going to make sure to explore Indiana. We wanted to see what Indiana had to offer, what is there to do. When you live in Florida, that's pretty easy. Anywhere there's a beach, there's fun to be had, right? Indiana, you got to look a little bit harder for it, but man, there's a lot of cool little communities in this state, and we got to go to one and spent the weekend up there in Shipshewana. Anybody know where that is? Been there? Okay, a few of you? Okay, we went up there to see 38 Special. Maybe you remember that old Southern rock band. We just kind of were fans of that. Man, those guys are getting old, brother. I mean, they are really getting up there. But it was a great show. But that is the most exposure that Kim and I have ever had to the Amish community. There are a lot of Amish people that live up there in that county. I couldn't even begin to guess. In Tennessee, there is a clan of the Amish in South Tennessee that you can run into from time to time, but it's a very small number. Boy, up here. And we knew we were in Amish country, right as soon as we got there, because I don't know what town it was in, but passing through there to get to Shipshewana, we passed a Walmart that actually had rails out in the parking lot where you could tie your buggy up. Now, we didn't have that in Orlando where we moved from, right? So it was pretty cool to see that. But another tip-off, Brenda, that we were in Amish country is when we got to the hotel we stayed in. I got to tell you the story. So Kim is waiting in the truck because it was snowing when we got up there. And and it was blowing sideways, right? It was like we went from nothing to blazing winter, right? Well, blazing would be the wrong word, Alvin. It was much less blazing, but it was really snowing hard. So she waits in the truck, and I go in, and I have to get in line behind a young Amish girl. And so when she steps up to the counter, she tells the clerk, she says, we stayed in your hotel last week, and we left some personal property in the room that we would like to get back. And so the guy looked at her, you could tell this guy has got no personal property sitting anywhere for somebody. But he just says, well, what did you leave? This is how we knew we were in Indiana. She said, we left a set of headlights for a buggy. We left a book and a 5-gallon bucket of grease for the axles. You will never hear that said in California, okay? Never. And hardly anywhere else. And so here we are in Amish country. But it was a great, great venue. If you've never been to the Blue Gate Theater, it's awesome. And a great community, and we got to enjoy it. And it's beautiful in its own way. The farms are neat and pristine. And their life is interesting. They, instead of confronting a lot of the world that like we do in the way we operate, they seem like they more withdraw, right? They more withdraw to themselves and kind of keep their community tight. And so it's very interesting, but we really enjoyed that. And if you hadn't had a chance to go up to I had to write it down, Shipshewana, then you should go check it out and go catch a show if you can. But anyway, so I want to talk with you just a minute. I told you that we were going to finish that series of lessons. Well, we're not. We're still there because I sit down and start writing things, and you never know exactly where it's going to go. But I will say this, is that would you agree that a lot of times life doesn't turn out the way we thought it would? Now, that doesn't mean that how it turned out was bad or anything. It could, but it just didn't go the way we planned. Because, we can't predict the future. We can only make some guesses. And so we look at our life and we know how we kind of want it to go, but then it doesn't go that way. And when it comes to sin has that amazing power just to wreck your life, just to knock it off course, to just not distract and destroy, because that's what sin does. And sometimes life really does stink. I mean, sometimes you do your very best to try to get through a problem in life, and it's just like one thing pops up after another, and you think, man, life just stinks. Well, I got a story about that. So when Kim and I lived in Tennessee, we lived in Mount Juliet, which is a little suburb of Nashville. It's to the east side. The only famous person that I could think of that came from Mount Juliet was Charlie Daniels. Anybody heard of him? Okay, great guy. A great guy in the community. If you lived there for a while, you would see him. He was always out and about. Just a super nice guy. He loved Jesus, and especially later on in his life. But anyway, so we're living in Mount Juliet. One day I'm walking down the driveway headed to the mailbox, and when I got about halfway down, I got that first whiff, right? a skunk. Now we had skunks in Tennessee, man. I mean, they're everywhere. I don't mean people. I mean the animal. I don't see them up here like down there because there's so many of them on the road that have been run over, you know, and you smell them coming and going. But I knew the smell as soon as I got it. And so when you're not sure where a skunk is, you slow down because you don't want to surprise that thing, right? And there was a pipe running underneath the end of our driveway, a drain tile, and I knew that's where it was. So I'm creeping up there to peek in to see if it's in there, right? This isn't going exactly where you think it is, Bill. And so, I see the look on your face. So I'm easing up to look and see if it's in there, and then I'll figure out what to do next. But my dog comes running up. I see my dog coming, right? And if my dog gets in there and starts barking, it'll mess up this plan I'm hatching, right? So I'm trying to stop her, and when she runs up to me, I just reach down to grab her, and I'm going to turn her around and send her back toward the house. Well, boy, when I reached down to grab her, she had been sprayed by that skunk. And when I touched her, it was like literally a funk you can't wash off, right? And so now I stink, the dog stinks, and she's panicking, right? I mean, she's flipping out over all this. And so I decide that I need to run in the house and see if we've got any, what? Tomato juice. Now, you know that's not true, right? That is not true. I looked it up on the internet, and if it's on the internet, you can believe it. It is not true. Tomato juice does nothing. In fact, that was a rumor started by a tomato farmer years ago. But anyway, so I'm trying to get in the house. I'm going to go inside, tell Kim what's going on. So I open the door. I try to ease in, but the dog is just flipping, right? So she shoots past me. And like 5 seconds later, I hear, "Philip David, dog, the dog." And I'm thinking, did she call me a dog? What is she doing here? Oh, no, it's a dog. And so I go running in, right? And I mean, by now the dog's in a panic. She's jumped on the couch, the bed, all the chairs. She's rolled across the carpet. I finally get her back outside. We washed her 3 times with the garden hose and Dawn dishwashing liquid, and it still didn't knock it out. She smelled for weeks, but the house smelled, Kim stunk, I stunk, the kids stunk. But the good thing is that when everybody stinks equally bad, you don't smell it at all, right? So it ended up not being too bad. But that's how life goes. Sometimes it just stinks. Sometimes it's stuff we get into and we bring the stink on ourselves. Other times somebody's the dog that runs by us and rubs up on us and causes us to stink. But sometimes life stinks. And not only does it stink, but sometimes we don't know how to fix that. We don't know how to wash the stink off of our life. Now, we've been talking about the problems that we face in life that keep us awake at night, right? And there are a lot of problems to deal with in this world. But I will tell you that not all problems can be solved by political leaders. Not all problems are solved by vaccinations. Not all problems are solved by socialists or capitalists or whatever the other divisions are around us. But I'd like to bring this even closer to home. I'm not really talking about the divisions in our nation between people. I'm talking about the divisions that are within us. I'm talking about when our life stinks, when we have been mistreated or we've dishonored God or however it happens. But I want to talk about fixing that. And the problem is that I believe God can fix the mess that we have in our personal life. I believe God has the capability of taking a surrendered heart, someone who has given up trying to fix it on their own and trusting in Him, and I believe that God will take care and fix these things. Now, we don't know how to wash the stink off of everything, right? We haven't figured out how to do that, but God can do it. Have you ever noticed this? This is just like an observation, but have you ever noticed how difficult a time human beings have of solving problems created by human beings? I mean, we have so many issues that we could spend all of our fortune and all of our time trying to solve, but these are things that human beings are doing to each other, and it's very difficult to solve those type of problems. But I do believe that God is even the answer to that. That there are people who are rejecting God. Maybe you're rejecting God. I mean, you're here, and that's awesome, but maybe you don't really believe. And maybe you're here because of who's with you, and you're just trying to make them happy. It could be a lot of reasons for that. But there are people that don't even believe in God, right? And reject Him, and believers do the same. But if we really understood God, now stay with me here for a second. If we really understood who He is, what is it about God? What is it that's in His heart? What is it? How competent is God in being God? You know, what is his character like? What does God value, and what does he hold as most dear and most important? And if we could just kind of wrap our minds around that, I really believe that it could change us. I know it would. It would change who we are. And all of a sudden, we wouldn't say the same things that we say when we're not in Christ. And we wouldn't go the places we go. We wouldn't worry about things like we do, and we'd live differently. I know we would. And the good news is we don't have to start from scratch to change. We don't have to start from scratch in order for our life to start stinking a little less. The Bible tells us about God, and the Bible tells us that the words found within introduce us to God and will put us on the path to knowing the will of God so that our lives can change. And so that's why we're in this one more extra week of Sleepless in Roachdale, because there's just some things that you can think of this as a bridge lesson to what's coming next, but I just want to talk about this thing that will keep you up at night. And remember what we said, God created us. It all started out good, you remember? We sat in our classes as kids listening to the creation story, the creation narrative, and we learned about, that Adam and Eve were created and God put them in this Garden of Eden, and it was a place of perfection, and there was no need there, there was no drama there was no sin there. It was just a perfect place, right? But then it got messed up. Sin came into it, and things started out good, but they got bad pretty quick. And so it all started when God creates Adam and then gives Adam this command. He says, and the Lord commanded the man. If you can see the sides, we'll add that to your prayer list up there. We're working on that. And the Lord commanded the man, he says, you are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, for when you eat of it, you will certainly die. All right, I know you remember that story, right? Everybody head shakes? You've heard that story before. Good. Well, the problem with eating the fruit isn't knowing right from wrong. I'm going to throw that out there up front. Wouldn't you love to always know for certain what's right and what's wrong? Knowing what's right from wrong is a very good thing. You see, until sin entered the picture, think about this, Adam and Eve didn't need to make the distinction between right and wrong because everything was perfect. They didn't have to know if something pleased God or not because they lived in a state of perfection and everything pleased God. But the problem is that sin came in, and God didn't send it in, they let it in, right? Satan comes in the form of a serpent, and he starts trying to tempt them, and so here comes Adam and Eve not knowing the difference between right and wrong, that they lived every day in this sinless utopia, and it was beautiful, and all their needs were met, and these brand new human beings, man, life was really good until Satan shows up. And then he talks to Eve and he plants that doubt in her mind. And what he does is he plants the seed of doubt in her mind about who God really is. Because listen to how this dialogue plays out here. Satan says, did God really say you can't eat from any tree in the garden? So he just rewords what God said. That's not what he said. And that's what Satan will do. He'll sound awful godly. He'll use a little godly in his talk to tempt you, to tempt us, to lead us astray. And that's what he's doing here. Did God really say you can't eat from any tree in the garden? She said, well, no. It's just that one tree, right? But Satan rewords, and here's what Eve does. She begins to doubt the power of God. I mean, I wonder if God really cares about me like I thought he did. I mean, why would God not want me to know these things? Well, what is it about God? What is he hiding from me? Why can't I have that, And bottom line is, can I trust God? I mean, is this God who couldn't have known too long? Can I trust this God to have my best interest at heart? And so what does she do? She gives in. She says, no, God doesn't have my best interest at heart. No, God didn't mean what he said when he said you can eat from anything but that one tree there. You got to leave that alone, but the rest of it you can go to town on, right? So she has to rethink all these things. And so she gives in and she eats the fruit, and then she gave some to her husband who was with her, and he ate it, and then the eyes of both of them were open. Eyes wide open here. Now, perfect harmony is gone. Chaos, that's in charge now. Adam and Eve, evicted from the garden. No rent moratorium for them. They're out. And now they are going to go leave this place of perfection that they've ruined And now they're going to go live in the chaos that you and I find ourselves living in now. Well, what is the result of that? 3 things. It's in your bulletin. You can fill this out. Number 1 is fear. There was no such thing as fear until this sin happened. But when it did happen, what was said? Well, I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid. Well, how did they know what fear was? Who told them about that? Well, now sin's in their world now, and that's fear comes from that. The second thing is shame. God's looking for them, and they said, well, we heard you in the garden, but we ran and hid because we were naked. Well, who told you you were naked? How do you know that? Why is that important now? Well, it's because sin's come in the world, and now we got to deal with shame. And here's another one, blame. That blame was when, well, here's what happened. Adam is the one confronted by God. And what does Adam do? Does Adam say, oh, God, you're right. I should have never eaten that fruit. Please forgive me. I can't believe what I was thinking. He just says, well, the woman that you gave me is the one who gave it to me. So what does Adam do? He blames her. He blames Eve, and he blames God, right? You know why I was so sad to see my last child leave home? Because I lost anybody to blame things on, right? When your kids are there, it's like, well, I guess the kids did it, right? Not anymore. And there's no room here either. There's no wiggle room here. Adam and Eve, living in perfection, perfect place, and they blew it. And they blew it because of their sin. And now they're going to live in fear, they're going to live in shame, and they're going to live in blame. And they have to leave the Garden of Eden. But before they do, God makes a promise in Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. He says there's a day coming where there's going to be a child born. He'll become a man. And he says the serpent will strike at his heel, but he will crush the serpent's head. In other words, sin and death are going to meet their match. And they're not going to get the last word, because there is going to be a man coming who is going to open up the door for us to be saved from all of this. And so once out of the garden, things get a lot worse very quickly. Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel are born. Then Cain kills Abel. So now we got murder, right? This is bad, bad, bad. And then things get worse. Genesis chapter 6 says, now the earth was corrupt in the Lord's sight, in God's sight, and was full of violence. And so in 6 chapters, we went from the creation being very good to now it's corrupt. Now it's full of sin, and now it needs a redeemer. And God saw that it was ruined, and his heart was troubled. And so we went from very good to corrupt and violent. And God sees all this. And then things get even worse. People come together one day and they said, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the earth. Now, this is loaded language in this verse right here. If you can see it on the sides. God started out creating us in his image, and then we're to have dominion over the whole earth. But we don't want to be in charge of just the earth. We want to be in charge of heaven too. And so people got together and said, let's build a tower. We'll just build a city. We'll put a tower in the middle of it. It ended up being called the Tower of Babel. And what does God do? He just shuts them down. He causes them all to speak different languages. They can't understand each other, and they scattered. But why did God do that? Now stay with me. We're going to wind down, but not yet. We're a mess. And we created the mess. And God has seen our capacity that for evil, that if it goes unchecked, that we, human beings, we will destroy ourselves. And so what does God do? He restrains them. The people are scattered all over the earth. These tower builders now are finding new places to live. The city they planned in their minds and their hearts, God said ain't happening. And off they go, and they got to find somewhere else to live. And so the bottom line of this, Garden of Eden, Tower of Babel, and all the other stuff, is that human beings, we're a mess. Right? Human beings starting out with fruit on the tree, spiraling all the way down to building a tower to heaven. And you got to wonder, has God just given up on us? Has God had enough of us? Is God ready to wash his hands of us? Is God wishing that he had never fooled with us? Can we count on God to save us or to do anything? And then I guess the big question, is there any hope for us? The answer is, well, yes. God has a lot of adjectives that connect to his name. He's Creator God. He's Comforter God. But today, what we're talking about today, you and I need a Redeemer. We need Redeemer God. And God is a Redeemer. He redeems sinful, broken, rebellious, chaotic people. And he gives us a new name. He sends a representative, a mentor of redemption. Abraham came first, a foreshadowing of Jesus coming. God said, I'm going to start a new deal with you, Abraham. I'm going to get a new nation. We're going to call it Israel. And this dream I have for you is not dead. And I'm going to redeem the human race. And over and over and over again, we get the promise. I'm the Lord. I will redeem you with my outstretched arms. I will take you as my own people. He kept saying, I will be your God. Job himself even said, I know that my Redeemer lives. And that's the God we reach out to. That's the God for us, because that's what we need. I don't need a little more intelligence. I do, but I don't, right? I don't need a little more cleverness. I don't need a little more strength. What I need is I need a Redeemer, because I am a lot more like Adam and Eve than I want to admit. I'm a lot more like Cain and Abel than I like to admit. I build towers of Babel in my life. I need redemption, and I'm going to bet a lot of you in this room right now, you need redemption. You need to clean up, and you need to start over with God, and God promises you a Redeemer. It's going to cost a lot. It's a heavy price. Let me tell you a story, and then we really will get toward the end. I'm going to stretch you here. Now, First Service got this. I don't know about in here, but I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to listen to this, think about it, and if you know an answer, you just let it rip, all right? Back in the 1960s, so for some of you, you don't know unless you've been studying history. What do you think in the 60s was the largest single non-book publication available in the United States in the decade of the 1960s? The Bible's a great guess. That sounded like my beautiful wife with that southern little twang there. That's a great guess. But it's not a book. It's a non-book, right? Non-book, number one seller. Okay, let me just say this. It wasn't a magazine, it wasn't a book, but it was a catalog. All right, catalog. All right, so what company do you think would be the catalog? Sears, that's a good one. What's another one? Pennies, there's a third one. Spiegel. Is that where you get your clothes? Never mind. I was thinking Montgomery Ward, right? Montgomery Ward, remember that? I don't know. Is that just a southern, were they up here? Okay. So Montgomery Ward. And it wasn't that one either. It was a catalog, and it was put out by a company called Sperry and Hutchison, or S&H. Has anybody heard of S&H green stamps by chance? Anybody? Okay, I know you youngins don't know this, and I barely remember it. Now, Kenny knows all of it, I'm sure. I barely remember it. But when you would buy something, then there was like a little wheel above the cash register that had numbers on it, and they would pull down these stamps. And they'd tear them off and give them to you, and you had to lick them and put them in the book. And then you saved them. The more of them you got, you could get stuff, like you could get a toaster, or, well, not a microwave, they weren't around yet, a blender, something, but you could get something cool, right? But you had to save up those stamps. You had to get the stamps. Now, here's what I read, that S&H Green Stamps during the 1960s printed 3 times more stamps than the United States Post Office did. And that their catalog, if you laid them end to end, would circle the earth. Now that's a lot of catalogs, and that's a lot of stamps, right? Well, why do people get all excited about this? It's just stamps, right? Well, no, it's not just stamps. It looks like paper and glue to you, but it looks like a mixer to me, right? And so you save up, you need stuff. And somebody told me after first service that, I can't remember who this was, but somebody said that they got a gift, a wedding gift, with a stack of filled up S&H green stamp books. Wouldn't that be a great wedding gift, right? Go down. So what do you do with when you get the stamps and you fill the books up? You take it to the Redemption Center, and you redeem the stamps for whatever it is that is the desire of your heart, right? You give them the books of stamps, and they give you the stuff. Well, they don't have that anymore. Amazon would have taken them out anyway if they had been around still. They were gone years ago. But I want to talk about the idea of a redemption center. Because I know of one that we could all still go to. The first time it ever opened was at a little hillside on the outskirts of Jerusalem at a place called Calvary. And that was where God, the one who kicked Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden, made the promise to them of redemption. This is where God fulfilled his promise, because Jesus Christ, his son, managed to live a perfect life and then was betrayed by his friends, kangaroo courted through a murder trial, hung on a cross and brutalized, and then killed and buried. And everybody that hated Jesus had a party. And they said, we got rid of him. That's over. That nonsense is through. Let's move on. But Sunday came, and they found that tomb empty, and the world has never been the same since. And why did Jesus go to that redemption center on Calvary? So that he could redeem you, redeem me. Something that has questionable value, but God sees a masterpiece in every one of us. And Jesus came to die to save you from your sins, so that you don't have to worry about the punishment that comes for those that don't know Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. This morning, if you are not a child of God, but you're ready to walk with Jesus, at least think about, while we sing this song, come up front and just confess Christ as Lord. Turn away from your sin. We'll baptize you and you'll begin your walk with Jesus today. If you're already a Christian and sin's in now, sin's come back, and you've eaten a bushel of those apples, and now you find yourself in sin, ask God to forgive you. Because in his compassion and his grace, that's exactly what he wants to do. So if you need that, this is your opportunity to come. Let's stand together and let's sing this song, and let's just see what the Lord's going to do.